Been looking for a house with no walls or no whispers, no hiding places, no secret sister. Been looking for a house that won't shelter a lie, no tear-stained past or reason to cry. I wanna live in a house of love.
Welcome to Empowering Women Everywhere. I am your host, Nan Gill, and today we have a very special guest. She was actually the first guest that we ever had in the first show that Empowering Women Everywhere ever taped and ever produced. Kellyann Kostyal Larrier from Safe Homes of Orange County. So great to have you back, Kellyann.
It's very exciting to be back, and I'm very honored to come back after a full circle and to not only be the first, but to come back and see you again.
Now, we had done a show, it was over a year ago, and there were a lot of things that I've seen in the media that you were involved in, so I put it on the calendar to give you a call to see if you could come back and give us an update about everything that you're doing and a little more about Safe Homes and your projects and what you're up to. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the organization, when you were founded, and what kind of work you're doing, and what the purpose of the organization is?
In October of last year, 2016, we celebrated our 30th anniversary of providing services to the community, to victims and their families that are impacted by domestic violence, teen dating violence, and human trafficking.
So you cover domestic violence, which is actually, people don't have to be married.
No.
It's
no.
just, intimate
partner, yes.
Intimate partner relationships. You now cover
teens, so we do. We have always covered teens, but we really do want to address. It's our fastest growing victim population, and so we want to be really clear that it used to be 1 in 5 victims, teen victims, would be impacted by teen dating violence. It's now 1 in 3. So we have been able to grow the program from a part-time youth educator to now 2 full-time youth educators that are working in our school districts and with our communities to address not only the victimization of our teens, but to really do some education and prevention at the same time.
Right. So you actually send these people to the schools and they meet with the students and they talk about some of the things that can lead to this?
We do all sorts of things. I think that the biggest work that we do is we go into all sorts of school districts and we provide certain levels of education, whether it's a one-time touch, but we really like to go in on multiple occasions because this is about behavior change and about systemic change. And so the idea is spending some time with not only the schools as the youth, but their teachers,
right,
their administrators, that we all play a vital role in undoing the impact of domestic and sexual violence. And then they do all sorts of fun things throughout the year to raise awareness. We have an art contest in February for our youth. We're getting ready next week to do our 4th annual Leadership Summit for youth. It's a conference that invites all the school districts to send kids to an all-day workshop around the impacts of teen dating violence. And this year we're focusing on social media, we're focusing on
right,
consent, we're focusing on inclusivity. And so we do workshops with the youth around the county, but we also do workshops with the teachers.
Okay.
So, yes.
And then the third thing that you mentioned was the trafficking.
I think when we were here last time talking, we briefly touched on some of the work that we had started doing, and we had just really launched, in partnership with the local Department of Social Services, our Safe Harbor Task Force. And our Safe Harbor Task Force is looking at vulnerable or at-risk youth that are at risk of being sexually exploited and or trafficked. And so that task force has really been fully operational for the last year. Our coordinator spends a lot of time not only coordinating that task force, but screening vulnerable youth, connecting them to services, and then looking for additional ways to support those victims we're coming in contact with. And we're also doing a lot of training, not only to law enforcement and social service providers, but we're also training the community on what to look for and what trafficking is.
Right. So if anybody suspects that someone might be involved in this, is there a number to call? Or
The best bet is to always call our hotline, which is 845-562-5340.
Right.
I'm a firm believer, if you see something, say something. And so that even if you don't feel safe enough to say something in that moment,
Right.
to at least ensure that you say something to someone so that we could potentially come in contact or intervene in a
Right.
situation where a youth is at risk. A lot of times people think that someone else is going to call the police or someone else is going to call the hotline, but everybody's thinking that. And so
Right.
we need everybody to think, see something, say something.
Now, your services are all confidential.
Yes.
So if someone calls, they don't have to be worried about that. And you also are very, from what I understand, you're very, very considerate of the victim. Like, you don't put the victim at risk. I know a lot of people might say, oh, geez, I better not say anything because I'm worried that they're going to send the police or that they're... But you're very, very discreet in how you handle
Everything we do is
situation.
about the victim.
Yeah.
I mean, in the end, it's about their own autonomy. And we truly believe that we're only a place to give them options, and then they get to make the most informed choice about what's right for their life. And there's no expectation of giving us your name or your information. It is confidential, and we don't move forward without informed consent. And so if that victim wants us in part of the process in a more visible way, in one of the systems that they may be coming in contact with, whether it's family court, whether it's the district attorney's office, we only do those things with the informed written consent of the victim.
Right.
Because this is always and always will be a place for victims first.
Right. Okay. And how do you ascertain if someone calls? I mean, say a neighbor calls. What's this way that you work that out? I mean,
Sure. Well, I do want the community to see us as a resource for anyone.
okay.
Because I want victims to know that they can call, and we'll do an assessment and a screening process to determine if we're the right agency for them
Right.
to be working with. But then we also want to be seen as a resource for everyone else in the community to call the hotline. So that if you know someone that may be impacted by domestic violence or trafficking, and you're not sure what to do, that you could call the hotline yourself, and that we could strategize and game plan about some of the options that you may have as a support system.
Right.
And I think the first thing we would always say, and the most important thing to do if you know someone who's impacted or is experiencing violence, is that you believe them.
Right. Exactly.
You know, that's, to me, the greatest weight, is that you believe that victim, and that you know your resources, and that you can pass over and pass on the victim to the resources that they need.
Now, I know that you have some programs for trafficking as well. How did you get involved in the trafficking detail that we have?
Well, I think we've always been working with victims of trafficking, and I would probably say that we were probably misidentifying them for many, many years, because I do think sometimes, especially when it comes to sex trafficking, oftentimes the trafficker lures the victim under the idea of a relationship. And so many times victims identify their trafficker as their intimate partner. And I think the more skilled we became and recognizing some of the additional layers to the tactics of control that a trafficker is using, we became better at identifying that the victims that we were working with were in fact actually trafficking victims. So for us, it started formalizing a process internally. And then when the opportunity came along to partner with the Department of Social Services, it was a really organic, natural fit, because we had already been doing all of this work around power and control, and they were receiving money from the state to create structure around access to vulnerable youth.
Right.
And sexually exploited youth. And so it was a really great partnership, and it has evolved into a great partnership with multiple agencies and organizations that are just as committed to addressing the issue.
Now, as far as control, there's different types of methods that the abuser utilizes that you might not even think is, you're being abused. But what are some of the ways that they exercise their control over the victim?
I so deeply appreciate your use of language, and also the question. It's so rare that people ask questions about different tactics that abusers use.
Right.
I think most people often default to physical violence because it's the obvious.
Right.
And we don't do enough to talk about emotional and psychological and financial abuse and sexual violence. And so many times victims may never experience physical violence. They are under that that abusers control, and they
Right.
experience significant and extreme forms of psychological and emotional abuse. And people don't recognize that a lot of times the physical violence is the least frequent tactic used.
Right.
It's often used when those other tactics aren't working. And so when we look at emotional and psychological abuse, emotionally calling someone names, making them feel like they're worthless, undermining their parent skills, minimizing the abuse that they're experiencing, isolating them from any family or friends or support systems they may have. And then when we look at psychological abuse, this is doing anything that is instilling fear in someone. You know, we always talk to law enforcement when we're training them. And I always say to them,
Right.
you know, when you have children, you know there's a look you can give a child. That means whatever you're doing is not okay.
Right.
And that can certainly be healthy in a parent-child relationship. But when there's a look between a partner and their victim, that's about power and control. And at no time should there ever be a look that instills fear or the sense of fear in a
Right.
victim. And so I definitely think we need to do more in identifying the invisible shackles of emotional and psychological abuse that keep victims entrenched and trapped
Right.
in the abusive situation.
So what I wanted to ask you is, what are you doing to educate the public about this issue? Because I know a lot of people don't even know that it's a problem.
Well, we're doing a lot of outreach. We were very fortunate with the initial round of funding with the Department of Social Services to create a lot of outreach material. So we have brochures, pamphlets. We were able to actually do 2 billboards that are over on 9W. So we are posting and getting the word out. We have palm cards, we have brochures. We're doing a lot of education training in the communities. And
Right.
our youth educators are also building it into their presentations. We're building it into our presentations. January is Trafficking Awareness Month, so we're doing a lot during the month of January to continue to push that education.
Right.
And yet we have a lot of work to do, because the more we talk about it, the more it brings other people to the table that have possibly interacted
Right.
with victims or potential victims that realize now that we have to be working collaboratively and collectively together to address this multi-pronged issue.
Right.
You know, that we're not just addressing rescuing or healing survivors, we're also addressing the traffickers, but the demand. So this takes a coordinated response that not just service providers, but the criminal justice system, whether it's the local government or the federal government, it takes a larger response, a community response around the demand, and a community response around the traffickers.
People don't realize that, you know, they think, oh, I'm in the privacy of my own home. If I look at some pornographic site, you know, it's not hurting anyone and nobody has to know. But they don't realize that they're actually, their demand of that is actually causing trafficking in other countries and even in this country.
Right. Well, and complicitness and complacency is not an excuse. And I do think that we need to recognize that these are not nameless victims. These are human beings, and these are people that are being sold, and it's a modern day form of slavery. And for anyone not to recognize that, it, you know, I would argue had some of their own personal gain in it. So we really have to hold everyone accountable, that this isn't just about dismantling one piece of the prong. If we don't go after all of the pieces, then we won't really be able to address
Well, if
the
there's,
issue.
it's just like anything else. If there's a demand, if
Right.
people are watching this or if people are participating in this, they're going to have to get the women to be able to do it.
Right. Which
So-
is often by force, fraud, or coercion. And I am a firm believer that anyone that's being prostituted is under force, fraud, or coercion. And anybody who's a minor should be considered trafficked, because
Right.
minors can't consent. And we have to really hold everyone accountable to that understanding. But in the end, it's deeply rooted in force, fraud, or coercion, and the inability to move freely or have your own agency. So we have to just keep educating people and challenging people to ask the question behind that face, and realize that there's someone's life impacted by that.
Exactly.
You know, and that it's
And it could be their daughter.
right.
You never know, because some people, you know, I mean, you don't usually hear about kidnapping, but how many kidnappings are there a year in the U.S.?
Well, I think the myth or misconception is that you have to somehow be taken to be trafficked. There are plenty of victims who are still functioning within everyday society that are also being trafficked, just like there are plenty of victims that are functioning and going to work every single day and then are going home and being horrifically abused by their partner. So it's not this idea of being taken or extracted from one place, because trafficking can happen without even having to leave one's home.
Right.
Right, because we're looking at not only the action, the harboring, the recruiting, and then you're looking at the means, like how did they do that through force, fraud, or coercion, and then what was the purpose? So you could absolutely traffic someone and they never have to leave their home.
Right.
And so we're missing a lot of opportunities to discuss potentially how someone's being trafficked, even just in our own, homes, paying attention to coming and goings, how much traffic there is, because with the use of technology today, more often than not, traffickers and those purchasing don't even have to leave their homes.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a lot of work to do to catch up with those that are participating in criminal activity.
Right. Now I know that you have some availability for volunteers.
Yeah.
And I know that you have training that they go through. So if anyone wants to volunteer.
We love volunteers.
Okay.
I mean, in the end, you can't do this work without them. And
Okay.
you can really volunteer in any capacity that works for you. We do have required training, and yet we also work with volunteers to get a good idea of what they'd be interested in. We have some volunteers that help us administratively. We have some that only help us on events. We have some that come in and do stocking and help with our donations. We have a few individuals that provide court advocacy and support for our hotlines. So it's really about meeting that individual volunteer's needs as well. But we do offer training 3 times a year. It's a 40-hour training that you have to go through to be able to volunteer with us.
Right.
But we're really interested. We love interns. So we do take interns, all different levels. We have a couple master level social work interns, and then we also have interns from the local community colleges, because we're really hoping to grow the next generation of ambassadors of this work, of
Right.
wanting to be an advocate for those whose voices are often taken from them.
Do you have a work-study program or something like that? Or
Someday.
training and program, work and training?
Someday, yes. I mean,
Okay.
we definitely, the closest thing we have to that is really our internships, our college level internships. But we're looking for any opportunity to cultivate anyone who wants to be an advocate for those who are marginalized and often left silenced and oppressed.
Now you have a lot of groups that also participate in volunteering in different ways. I know our church does Christmas time.
Yes, adopt a family.
We different presents you can bring or something like that. Do you want to speak a little bit about that?
Well, I mean, the individual level of volunteerism is so important, and then the community and business level is extraordinary. I always think of like that never thought a thoughtful committed group of citizens to change the world. You get a couple of individuals in the room and they can change everything. So we have organizations that have donated emergency items, housing wares, food. We've had groups come in and do a painting project to rejuvenate and restore some of our facilities so that they have a fresh face and a fresh coat of paint. We've had groups adopt a family like your wonderful church has. We've had organizations, purchase tables at our gala. But we work with any group that wants to get creative. We've worked with the Girl Scouts to help them earn their gold stars and their silver stars. We've done Boy Scout troops. A lot of organizations help us during the kickoff of the school year with a backpack drive. So we look for any opportunity for someone to bring us into their business and organization, because I have no doubt we can find ways to come together. And emergency items, there can never be too many emergency items. We need those basic items of full-size shampoos, razors, shaving cream, large-size diapers, just those emergency needs for those people that are in immediate crisis.
Now I heard you got some good news with some of these grants that you were able to get. So you want to talk about some of the expansion on the programs that you have?
Well, all of our funding is primarily grants, and so you know that you spend a lot of time writing grants for sustainability. And so when all the planets align and things come together, it's very exciting. And so three of the things that we're probably most proud of right now is we have been working with the city of Port Jervis and the city of Newburgh for a long time about partnering on a more intimate level to address first responders and how we can support victims.
Right.
And so
because that's really when it happens. I mean, that's when you can get in and make a
It's
difference.
definitely an opportunity, and the
Right.
research supports that the faster you can get victims information, the more likely they can make informed decisions about what the next steps are in their life.
Right.
So even if you can't make an arrest, we need to leave them better than we found them. And so the research shows that collaborations between law enforcement and DV agencies is effective and efficient. So the city of Newburgh was first, and actually we're a month up and running, but it is a high-risk lethality team. And that team is really looking to target those cases where there's a high risk of physical injury and or death.
Right.
And so our
That's
officers,
really important.
right. And so our officers are looking for cases by screening for high risk. And then if those cases screen in, the first thing they're going to do is they're going to connect that victim right there on the scene at the time of the incident with an advocate on our hotline.
Right.
So that the victim can then have as much information as they need to make the next decision they have to make in regards to their safety.
Right.
And then any of those cases that screen in then are referred to the case conferencing team, which is comprised of the district attorney's office, probation, the police department, and safe homes.
Right.
And we're going to track those cases and ensure that there's consistency around victim safety and offender accountability. So there's lots of partners. We're really excited. We're in the infancy stages, and then we are in the infancy stages of launching next month Port Jervis. We're just in the process of training all their officers and rolling out the protocol, but that will go into effect next month. So we'll have 2 active high-risk teams in the county. So we're very excited about that. And I know last year I was here telling you that we were really hoping to open a new shelter.
Right.
And this week we found out from the state that they are going to support our project and help us build a brand new facility. And so we will be able to add 20 beds to our 17, which would give us 37 beds for the county for victims and their families. And it's been a long time coming. It was
Right.
really hard to accept that oftentimes we were having to turn away people because we were full.
Right.
And while we can sometimes work with outside communities, it's not always the best place to go outside your community when all your resources in your community is in your community.
Exactly.
So the opportunity to potentially address that gap of not being able to meet that need because we're full is a long time coming, and we're really, really excited. And we couldn't have done it with the amazing support of so many individuals in the community, people who had faith in us, the government system, from the county exec, from the district, all of the people from the commissioner of social services that wrote letters of support.
Right.
It took a community to bring this here,
I
and that's an enormous responsibility, but we're really, really excited to have the opportunity to know that there'll be 20 more beds in the county to provide wraparound case management services for the victims that are fleeing
Right.
in the most dangerous time of their lives, in the most vulnerable time in their lives, that they need as much support as they can get.
Yes.
And so we're excited. It's unfortunate that we have to continue to build these services, but it's also really important that they continue to be funded because the victims aren't going away,
Right.
and they need these services and more, and they're entitled to them as far as I'm concerned.
Now you also have secondary services that you're working on, so that once they come into a safe place
Yes.
and they're able to start their lives over again, that you're able to give them to support to become independent.
Well, I think the 2 biggest challenges for victims of domestic violence is economic self-sufficiency. If victims of domestic violence don't have some sort of economic self-sufficiency and empowerment, the ability to leave is so restricted.
Right.
And then adequate, affordable housing. And across the country, it is so difficult to find adequate, affordable housing. And so we partnered with Honor, which is an amazing organization in this county that provides services to homeless, and they have a youth runaway shelter, to go in on transitional housing. And we applied to a grant from HUD, and we just received notice last month that we are going to go forward in our partnership. And so we will potentially have anywhere from 6 to 8 transitional housing units starting in October for victims of domestic violence and their children to have that next step, to kind of bridge the gap, to give them time to build up their economic self-sufficiency, to have a safe house so that they can rebuild and heal. And we are really excited. And obviously from the leadership there with Chris Molinelli and Honor, couldn't have done it without their support because it's a big endeavor. And we wanted to do it right, and we wanted to make sure, and they have a lot of experience with transitional housing. So it was a no-brainer on the partnership, and we're just ecstatic because that piece right there that's often very difficult to meet could potentially be the life decision
Yes.
of either having to return
Right.
to that abuser or being able to take one step forward in a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
And that's outside of the victim's control. That's an environmental control. The inadequacy of affordable housing, the inability to have sufficient money coming in to support yourself. And those should never be reasons that a victim is forced back into that decision of having to return.
It's always been amazing to me that with all the houses that have been foreclosed, why the government doesn't come in and say, okay, you can have this one, and this one, you know?
In a perfect world, I would not begin to even think I understand the complex nature of foreclosure. But yes, if I had a magic wand, I would think to myself that there are so many individuals that just need that one step.
Yep.
That they just need the opportunity to save money and to have a roof, a sustainable roof over their head, a safe roof over their head.
Yep.
That one act could literally transform their lives.
So, this is an open call for anyone that wants to help Kellyann use her magic big wand to make something great for the community. Give her a call, and your number is?
Our business line is 845-562-5365. And then our crisis 24-hour hotline is 845-562-5340.
And your website?
www.safehomesorangecounty.org.
So it's been an amazing pleasure to have
It's
you
wonderful
as
to always
usual.
see you.
And we'll have to get all this in a half-hour show. You viewers are going to miss a lot of it because we've been talking probably for an hour and a half, which we always do when we get together.
It's very true. It's very true. And I would just encourage people to connect with us. If you'll let us come in, we will take any opportunity offered to us.
Right. And if you want to volunteer, if you want to start a fundraiser.
We're doing Parties with a Purpose right now, so if you want to host something in your home, we can come share with those that you love in your community what we're doing. We're really creative. So like I said, if you'll invite us in, we'll make it work. We just want to get the word out.
Right. So get the word out. Safe Homes of Orange County, Inc. And this is Nan Gill, your host of Empowering Women Everywhere. And thank you so much for tuning in. And if you or someone you know should be on our show that's doing amazing work, come on, give us a call and join us at empoweringwomeneverywhere.tv. Phone number is 845-294-7500. We look forward to connecting. Have a wonderful day.
I've been looking for a house with no walls or no whispers, no hiding places, no secret sister. Been looking for a house that won't shelter